Good morning, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to speak to you today about readers and blogging, but more generally, our use of social media. And can I just say I'm really excited because I have a librarian friend called Vasiliki, who some of you might know, and over the years, she's told me all about Readers Advisory. And so I've been really curious about what happens in this secret book club of librarians every year. So really psyched. So my name is Kat Mayo, and I run a blog and a podcast called Book Thingo. This year, my blog will celebrate its 10-year blogiversary. And although a lot has changed in social media since we began publishing in the blog, one fundamental aspect of book blogging hasn't really changed, and that it's driven by readers who are passionate about books. When I discovered romance book blogs in 2003, while I was home on maternity leave and super bored, the idea of reading lists being curated by readers was almost revolutionary for me. I had gone online to look up an author whose book I really loved. I think it was Kathleen O'Reilly, who was writing for Mills and Boon at the time, and stumbled upon what would eventually become two of the biggest romance book blogs, Dear Author and a blog called Smart Bitches Trashy Books. Although online communities already existed for romance through listservs and bulletin boards and forums, I think blogging changed the accessibility of the online book culture for readers. I didn't have to sign up to a platform. I didn't have to register for a bulletin board. I didn't even have to create a username for myself. I could just read and lurk and then choose to participate or not if I wanted. Those early romance blogs and the online communities that existed before blogging gained traction because romance was largely ignored by mainstream media. And this meant that readers like me couldn't find information about whether or not a book I was thinking of buying was a good book, was well written. In the early 2000s, if you were lucky, you might find a short review of the book on Amazon by a reviewer called Harriet Klausner. Klausner, who became a kind of running joke within the romance community because she only ever gave 4 or 5 stars in her book reviews. She was actually featured in Time magazine in 2006. And the early romance blogs I remember reading were in part a way for readers to push back against Klausner's unrelenting niceness. Because when readers, and particularly readers of genres and books in popular culture, are looking for book reviews, our primary goal is to find a book that we will enjoy. And especially for romance readers, there are a lot of books in the market. So someone who can never dislike a book eventually becomes a poor resource for an individual reader. The early blogs in romance land, sorry, I forgot that I had a PowerPoint. The early blogs in romance landia, as we like to call it, were almost like curators of books for readers like me. They weren't gatekeepers because those blogs didn't have a role in the publishing process, but they became sort of tastemakers. They led to conversations about what's missing in the genre, what's problematic in the genre, and they also promoted amazing new authors and books. So if you look through the archives of Dear Author and Smart Bitches, you'll find really productive, sometimes combative discussions around consent in romance fiction, which we're having again now today. And there were conversations about marginalized authors and readers, publishers behaving badly, and a lot of snarking over some really bad romance covers. They also reviewed e-published books way before Kindle was even a thing. So Elora's Cave was an erotic romance publisher that is now sort of closed, but they launched in the year 2000. And I remember bloggers and readers talking about books, reading books on their Palm Pilots, on their computers. I think some people were even printing them out on paper so that they could read them offline. And these were stories that would never have featured in mainstream media in the literary section of any newspaper or magazine. But they were stories that people wanted to read and to buy. But as I mentioned, social media has changed since then. The landscape has changed a lot. Reading culture has also evolved. blogs are still around, but increasingly I'm seeing that it's not where the majority of readers are discussing books. Today we have Facebook, we have Twitter, Instagram, Goodreads, publishing platforms like Whatpad and online fan fiction communities. And the lines between author and reader also really getting blurred. Readers are authors, authors are readers. Sometimes readers become literary agents and editors. And so when you have publishers, readers, editors, agents, booksellers all hanging around in sort of the same online water coolers, it changes the interactions. But what has not changed is that social media is still a really fantastic place for readers to discover new titles and authors. What also has not changed is that for readers, trust is the biggest factor in where we get our recommendations. So as a blogger, I get a lot of emails requesting me to read and review books. I accept like a tiny, tiny percentage of these, sometimes not even one per month. And especially in the romance genre where books are plentiful, it's really difficult to sift through new titles. So if you're doing reader's advisory, you have my sympathy. There's a lot of books to look at. And it's really actually impossible to sift through every title, read every blurb, and figure out what's going to appeal to readers. And even though I review books, my primary goal when I select a title to read and to review is the expectation that that book will be fantastic. Like I don't pick up a book just because it's popular. I might pick up a popular book because I expect it to be really good because so many people are saying good stuff about it. So my secret to book discovery is basically word of mouth. But obviously that's going to be hard for Reader's Advisory, where you might have to recommend books in genres and categories that you don't normally read in. So with this in mind, I wanted to look at some of the social media platforms that might be useful for yourselves and maybe look at some of the strengths and weaknesses of these platforms. With the caveat that my perspective is very much skewed towards the romance genre community. So just to start off, how many of you are part of book groups in Facebook? How many of you talk books on Twitter? Goodreads, Instagram. For those on Instagram, how many of you are primarily focused on young adult fiction? Let's see. Any others? Whatpad? Anyone on Whatpad? Oh, very interesting. Fan fiction communities? Oh, great. Okay, so the numbers are quite different for each of the platforms, and that's kind of what you'll find with readers as well. So anecdotally, Facebook remains one of the dominant platforms for online reader communities for a number of reasons. So it's where, shall I say, older people, older readers interact with family and friends, and that includes myself. So belonging to Facebook groups and liking pages about books and authors is kind of like a logical extension for us. We're already on the platform, and so it's just easy to consume other content as part of our daily routine. So when I say older, I mean kind of Generation X upwards, and I think you'll find fewer readers under 30. I actually have reader friends who almost never go to Facebook, and there are some book communities, book organizations and associations who are mainly on Facebook, and so they sort of never ever see the news from those organizations because they just don't interact on Facebook that way. I think authors and publishers, though, like Facebook because it limits the ability to be anonymous. So I don't know if you remember, but earlier on when Facebook rolled out the platform to the public, they took the stance that they expected people to use real identities and that you could only use one identity. You couldn't, create sort of duplicate profiles. So this led to all sorts of problems for Facebook. So I don't know how heavily they're policing this, but sort of that general expectation, I think, is still there, that people on Facebook are real people. So these two factors, real identities and people using Facebook socially with actual friends and family, it gives Facebook interactions a sense of closeness and familiarity. And I think many readers love this. Like, if you love an author and they answer they reply to your comment on Facebook, like as a reader, it's like you've just talked to it, like an actor just talked to you, Some of these authors have huge, huge followings. And we love getting a sense of who the author is, you know, whether they love chocolate chip cookies, you know, whether it's snowing outside, what their dogs are doing. So all that stuff, sort of like friendly interaction on Facebook. I find that Facebook communities skew towards positive interactions between readers and authors, and I think that's partially because of the way Facebook's set up. And especially in groups that are owned by authors and publishers. So if you are trying to find books in those communities, you will probably not get sort of critical analysis of the latest romance, but you will get, you know, my new release is coming out in July. This is what it's about. Oh, here's the cover. Usually it's got like abs, which is fine. A lot of the groups have specific niche interests as well that are specifically focused on an author or a publisher, subgenre, a special interest, you know, motorcycle club, romances, and so forth. The groups that are focused on readers tend to be closed groups. These are the ones where you will get more honest discussions about books, where the recommendations won't all be, you know, read this, read that. Sometimes it'll be avoid this, or more likely it'll be like, I didn't enjoy this because blah, blah, blah. But if you like, you know, billionaire heroes who have helicopters, you might like this book. But even then, I think everyone on Facebook is aware that if you post something online, someone can do a screen capture and post it somewhere else. I think people are quite careful about what they say. The most honest discussions about books that I've had are always on direct messages, either on Facebook or on Twitter. So the other thing you need to watch out for is the changes in Facebook's algorithm. So even if you're a member of some of these groups, you might not see their messages coming through your feed, because Facebook changes the algorithm for what you see all the time. And it's actually really frustrating. It's frustrating for authors, it's frustrating for readers. And for that reason, it isn't my primary way to discover books. But if you want to get a sense of what readers are talking about, it's a really good place. Okay, so this is just a slide about how you can discover new communities in Facebook that maybe you didn't know about. So this is a page, the Book Binge blog page. So you can have a look. There's like a widget that shows what other pages that they've liked, and usually those will be related communities. So it's kind of like a good way to extend your knowledge of a certain book community. Okay, so Twitter is usually where I hang out. So romance Twitter in the last 2 days has been just completely ridiculous. But it was really interesting because I saw a tweet mentioning how different romance Twitter was to romance Facebook. Twitter is faster paced than Facebook, and it can get a lot more heated. People tend to post receipts on Twitter, which means like screenshots and quotes of things you said before that contradict what you're saying now. My friends love to do this to me. It's really great for chatting in real time. You can chat in bits and pieces. If you've only got like 5 minutes while you're waiting for Reader's Advisory to start, you can go on Twitter, have a couple of conversations, and then resume it once you've got more free time. Do you guys all know what a hashtag is? Yeah, okay, good. So that's basically a keyword preceded by hashtag that you can click, and it sort of acts like a link so you can see related tweets. It can be really effective. And I think the Reader's Advisory used to run a hashtag on Twitter for a little while, I think for maybe a year or so. Yeah, so the most effective use of a hashtag that I've seen, at least in Australia, is the Love Oz YA hashtag, which has now become a community, which I think is now like a formal sort of group that promotes young adult fiction, and they're in literary festivals and so on. So hashtags on Twitter can be really productive if you target the hashtag really well. And I think that's something that maybe libraries haven't really made enough use of. The thing to remember about hashtags, it requires volume. So when you run like a monthly hashtag, you really need readers to be involved, and that often involves like nagging people in a nice way, reminding people. I remember we used to do like I think it was called South Pacific Book Chat, and that ran for a couple of years. The latest one that I do weekly is called Pacey's Creek, which is a rewatching of Dawson's Creek, but like sort of saying how annoying Dawson is and how great Pacey is, but that's not really book related, but sort of you get the idea. Twitter is not for the faint-hearted. If you don't understand Twitter, I would suggest just getting an account and just watching first to see what the interactions are like. Because things happen in real time, discussions can really gain a huge momentum and they can snowball into conflicts. But the opposite is also true. So you can create vibrant communities and book groups through Twitter. So like I said, Love OzYA. More recently in romance, we had a hashtag called RomBookLove, which got a huge following and has now turned to sort of a regular monthly discussion about books. And because a lot of the discussions on Twitter are public, it does limit some of the discoverability of books. So, for example, a reader recently tweeted asking for recommendations of romance or erotic books with non-consent or dubious consent. There were like 3 or 4 replies on Twitter, basically saying, don't know anyone on Twitter that can give you these recommendations. And a friend told me privately that you would never find that on romance Twitter. You'll only find that on romance Facebook because they'll be they will be closed pages and smaller communities where sort of everyone sort of knows everyone else. And there's no risk that your comments can be misconstrued because it was like the 3rd tweet in a thread of 10, you know. So on Twitter, there's a risk that a random thread can become an argument, but also that's what makes it fun for some of us. So it's a double-edged sword. Goodreads is the one that I think most people here have an account in. It's actually a natural platform for books because it is about books. There used to be more alternatives to Goodreads, but I can only think of 2 that still exist. So those would be Library Thing and Brifle. I love Goodreads because I can never remember what I've read and what I thought about the book, or like I'll remember I love this book, but I can't remember the title. I only remember that I read it in January of like 2016. So Goodreads allows me to catalogue the books that I've read. It's like a book diary for me. And in its early days, Goodreads allowed readers to actually change metadata about books and add books. And so we were called Goodreads librarians. I think they've sort of, they have an approval process for that now, but a lot of the people who signed up early to Goodreads still have that capability. And it's really great for Australian readers because a lot of the catalogue is, obviously because of the Amazon integration, it's US centric. So in the olden days, I used to enjoy like uploading all the Australian covers for Mills and Boon, which you'd never find in sort of the automated catalogues. So it'd all be US based. And I don't know how much you know of Mills and Boon, but we used to have Mills and Boon books that were 2-in-1s. And the US wouldn't have that, so I would really enjoy like putting 2-in-1s and confusing everybody. But it was good for me because those are the books that I read. Those are the editions that I read, so I could search for them on Goodreads and they would appear. And I think it's good that we're able to change the metadata because sometimes it's actually wrong. Another thing I love about Goodreads is the ability to define my own bookshelf, which I think causes a bit of concern for some authors. So I keep a shelf called Vomit Books, which is a list of romance books that feature someone vomiting, right? But the downside is some authors look at it and they think that their books, make me vomit, and so that it causes them great angst. And I'm like, no, it's just books where people vomit. So now I've had to like put comments to say so-and-so character vomited on page blah, 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 just so it's very clear. So authors can sometimes take things really personally on Goodreads, which is why I don't usually use it to interact with other users to find books. Like I use it as a book catalog, but not as an interactive platform. Specifically, I check Goodreads for ratings to get a general idea of what readers like, of how much readers like the book. So it'll have an average rating based on all the ratings that readers have given. But I also use Goodreads to find out if the book has a happy ending, because in print books, I can go to a bookshop and read the back of the book and go, yeah, this is a romance. I'm happy to read this. With ebooks, I can't do that. Like there's no flicking to the back of an ebook. So the primary purpose of Goodreads for me nowadays is for me to go through all the spoilers that people have posted and figure out if I can live with those spoilers. And this is one of the most valuable aspects of Goodreads. Readers define what it is. For example, Goodreads allows you to rate a book from 1 to 5. So that sounds pretty straightforward, right? But some readers think that 1 means that the book is fantastic and 5 means that the book is not. So they will rate their favorite books 1s and the worst books 5s. And you can't even imagine how much angst this causes authors because of all the algorithms that these ratings affect. And readers also, well, I hate to say it, we also reward and punish authors through Goodreads, through ratings. So you'll often see 5-star ratings for books that haven't even come out yet. And that's basically readers expressing how excited they are for this book, how much they love the series, how much they love the author, how much they're looking forward to the book. Kind of unhelpful if you're trying to figure out if a book is any good because it hasn't even come out yet. Likewise, if an author is perceived to have behaved badly, said something terrible about readers, there are a lot of readers who will rate that book a 1 as a sort of, it's really a punishment, let's be honest. So I always check the comments on Goodreads to see whether the rating is being skewed one way or the other. Goodreads also provides a discussion platform. So Goodreads has similar to the old forums and bulletin boards. It's kind of old school and it's really ugly, but it works. I don't use it because I feel like I'm back in 1990, but a lot of people do use it. And there's a lot of Australian book clubs that are on Goodreads. I know there's definitely a few rural fiction groups on Goodreads. There is the Vaginal Fantasy Book Club, which is a book club for romance genre and romance adjacent books with strong female lead characters. There is over 18,000 members. And that group also, the people who started that group now also run a video blog. And they're super popular. I think they broadcast live. They're really, really popular. I didn't write Vaginal Book Club, Fantasy Book Club, because I just thought, but I'm sure you all remember that one. Okay, so Amazon acquired Goodreads in 2013. So there's a little bit of overlap between the two. I believe Goodreads now uses the Amazon catalog as its sort of basis for its list. For readers, though, they do bring different strengths and weaknesses, and I think we're all pretty familiar now with how Amazon works. So I don't want to spend too much time on the monopoly we love to hate, except to say that one of its strengths is its recommendations algorithm. So my librarian friend Vasiliki and I have had many conversations about what this algorithm means for discoverability, because as a reader, I love it, right? Because I will look at a book and Amazon will show me a list of books that customers who looked at this book or who bought this book also bought. So for me, that's like a substitute for reader trust. I'm like, well, if they like this book enough to buy it and I like this book too, then maybe I'll buy the same books that they bought. And because it's likely that we have the same taste of books. Vasiliki's point is that it kind of reduces the serendipity of discovery, because then Amazon is sort of pushing books towards you and you're not seeing other books that might also appeal to you. So bit of a philosophical question, but I thought Reader's Advisory might enjoy that. Bloggers and book reviewers will almost always have a preference for Amazon for 2 reasons. So Amazon makes it very, very easy to earn money through affiliate links. It's one of the first platforms to offer affiliate links and make it easy for anyone to use them. Like, we don't really actually earn that much, $2 a couple of months, whatever. But everyone kind of hopes for the best. Like, they're like, one day I'll earn enough in affiliate links, but like very few people do. Kindle integrates with NetGalley and Edelweiss. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with NetGalley, Edelweiss. They're like publisher catalogs for books. NetGalley is a lot more geared towards advanced copies of books. NetGalley allows you to just download to your Kindle with like a click. It's so easy. So I've used different readers other than Kindle before, and once I used Kindle, I couldn't go back to the other ones. It's just so well integrated. And the other thing about Amazon, if you set up your account right, you can get books from the US that Amazon Australia either won't let you get or will charge you like a hefty price for. So there is a bias towards Amazon, especially for genre readers, and I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon. Okay, so Instagram is kind of the new kid on the block, I guess. It's huge in the book world, and especially for younger readers. It's really pretty. Like, I'm so bad at flat lays. My Instagram looks so bad compared to other people's, and I wish I'd actually shown you pictures. But it's a very visual medium, and there's some creative bookstagrammers out there, and I'm continually amazed at their skill. And you know how people say, don't judge a book by its cover? Well, in Instagram, it's all about the cover. It's all about pretty covers, rainbow covers, and a beautifully presented cover will sell books. In romance, a beautifully presented cover probably involves like a naked man on the front. In YA, it tends to be like cursive fonts and sort of illustrated covers. And then, you know, people put like flowers around them. Like, I don't know how, like, and food with books is like the best. So readers also take photos of the text within the books. So instead of writing out your favorite quote, you can just like take a picture, circle it, and then post it on Instagram. And those also get a lot of interaction with readers. And I think quotes on social media, I think probably sell a lot more books than we give them credit for. And sometimes it's a bit of a mixed bag because the quote is better than the book as a whole. It's a bit like movie trailers. So I love flicking through my feed. I'm really bad at posting on Instagram, but I love looking at other people's Instagram. And I think if you're looking at young adult fiction, then you will want to look at the Bookstagram. So Instagram really works on hashtags for discoverability. So, you know, if you look up Love Oz YA, you'll get a lot of the Australian books. You know, YA fiction, Bookstagram, it's all quite generic, and then you'll get like a whole list. And with Instagram, my strategy is really just to find the readers, the Instagram accounts who read similar books to me, but not exactly the same. Because what I've realized over the years is if I only follow the people who read the same books that I do, I don't actually discover any new books because we're all discovering the same books at the same time. So it's good to have sort of genre adjacent accounts so that I can see what else is out there. The next one is hosted platforms, so blogs, podcasts, and video blogs. So I put them all together because I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think blogs are actually decreasing in popularity, in influence over the years. Social media is increasingly about information finding its way to users rather than us looking for the information. So we use platforms like Twitter, and I use platforms like Twitter and Facebook to promote blog posts, but a lot of the discussion happens on Twitter and Facebook. People don't go to the blogs to comment much anymore. There are a few blogs where the comment threads are still quite robust, but not as much as when I started blogging in 2008. Goodreads and Amazon allow readers to review books without the hassle of having to manage a blog. There's no administrative overhead. So I think it's really easy for new readers to be reviewers on Goodreads and Amazon. Podcasts are my new favorite medium. I think it's still rising in popularity. So you guys have all probably heard of podcasts, but you've all probably heard of podcasts like Serial and the ones that sort of radio broadcasters are promoted. There's a lot of niche podcasts out there about books, and I'll have a list at the end of the slide deck. There are some good Australian podcasts as well that have started up around books. I like it because it's great for people who are commuting, it's great for people who do housework, and it's great for people who go and do exercise. I'm like 1 out of 3 for that, but I'll let you guess which one. And it's the thing about podcasts, it's one directional. It's me talking to the audience. The audience doesn't really talk back to me. So as a podcast producer, it's a little bit alienating You probably need a different platform for the discussion, so Twitter or a blog or Facebook. But I think I haven't seen a library podcast, really. I think maybe that's a gap that some of you might want to fill. I know of quite a number of romance podcasts. I'm almost sure, it's not my genre, so I haven't really looked extensively, but I'm pretty sure there's a lot of science fiction fantasy podcasts. Anything that intersects with movies and films is probably a lot of. There's very few children's podcasts, and I only know of a few young adult podcasts, which is amazing because young adult is quite popular in Australia. So I think there's like a lot of room for growth in podcasting. There's a few barriers to entry with podcasting, but not as much as video blogging. Video blogging seems to have, video blogging got very popular through YouTube, and there are some US bloggers that are they're like celebrities because they're video bloggers, like they're huge. I can't stand myself on video, and therefore like my video blogging career is not going to take off. It's really popular among younger people, I found, because they have the time and the energy and they can develop the skills to do video editing. There's a lot more equipment and logistics involved in video versus podcasting. So podcasting, even if you have sort of ordinary audio, like some sound background noise, you can sort of make up for it in editing. With video, if your lighting is really bad, there's like not much really you can do about it. So, but definitely if you're looking at YA books, you should look into some of the YouTube video blogs. I think there's a few Australian vlogs as well. I know that I can't remember her real name, Felicity, who used to be the publicist of Penguin. She runs a YouTube blog. But yes, young people. Newsletters. So newsletters, some people hate them, some people love them. I'm kind of in the middle, so I subscribe to them, but I only read them like once every week or every 2 weeks. Like they get automatically put in a folder in my mailbox, and then I open it when I have time to look through it. So my favorite ones are Book Riot. I think Book Riot segments their newsletters, so you don't have to, the newsletter doesn't talk about every single book that they talk about, so I only subscribe to the romance one. And I actually find their romance newsletter quite fun. It's like in normal people language. They have the links in the text. It doesn't feel like I'm being marketed to. It feels like I'm having a conversation with someone, so I love that. BookBub is more of a marketing newsletter, but it's so popular with readers, like so popular. And authors have told me that they get really great results from promoting their books through BookBub. So BookBub is a newsletter that promotes books that are on sale in Amazon. I think it's like they prefer books that are $2 or less. So it's really, for authors, it's so great for discovery. And typically they will put like first in a series on sale into BookBub, with the hope that if the reader likes it, they will then buy in full price the rest of the books. So it's kind of similar to libraries, right? So in the library, you would try a book first in the series, hopefully, if the library has first in the series, and then you would either borrow the rest, or what I found, with at least for myself, is that I can't wait for the library to give me the next book, so I'll just go and buy the next book. Excuse me. We also have, like Booktopia has a romance fiction newsletter. I think it's called Love and Life. So it's women's fiction and romance. I used to write for that newsletter. I used to be a lot more romance focused, but I think they've broadened it in response to the market. So what's interesting with that is, because Booktopia is a bookseller, they have they can look at their stats of what's selling. And what you'll find in their newsletter is usually what the books that they think readers will buy based on previous buying patterns. So that's kind of interesting to see where sort of the market is at. So you have to look out for curation bias. So, for example, Booktopia will not list any book that Booktopia can't sell, obviously, because there would be no point. An author newsletter isn't going to give you books that the author didn't write, or their friends didn't write, publishers similar. Even something like Book Riot will tend to be biased towards US books. I mean, I know they try to be a bit more diverse, but that's just going to be the way it is. So that's just something that you have to look out for. And there's more. There's like Whatpad. Whatpad's super popular for teens. I don't know how popular it is in Australia. So I'm from the Philippines. I discovered that Whatpad is humongous in the Philippines. Like they make TV shows out of it, movies out of it. They publish books from it. Some of the Whatpad authors, when they have signings in the Philippines, they actually hire a basketball stadium. Like that's how many people they get. And they turn people away at the door because they just can't have like any more. And so these are platforms for self-publishing. So these are where self-publishing authors learn how to write, and usually this is sort of where they get their sort of contact with publishers. So if you think about C.S. Pacat, E.L. James, Sally Thorne, Christina Lauren, Anna Todd, they all came from either fan fiction, one of these fan fiction platforms, or Wattpad. The other one is, did I put this? Okay, it's not on that list, but how many of you subscribe to NetGalley? Do you guys get copies from NetGalley? Okay, and Edelweiss? None. Okay, so Edelweiss is similar to NetGalley, not as pretty, but the catalog is larger, I think. I actually prefer Edelweiss because NetGalley is a bit more promotional. Edelweiss is very like, this is the catalog for publishers and this is when it's going to come out and so on. Like I think the metadata in Edelweiss is more robust. But if you are curating books, I would suggest being on those platforms and getting in touch with publicists and trying to find a way for them to send you books in advance. Because reading those books is really the best way to figure out what you want to put on your lists, which books are good, right? So where to start? So I was biased towards romance. I thought I'd put romance up top. So Fictionally Yours Melbourne, the biggest romance event in Australia. They sold out 500 tickets for their event within 24 hours, not even 24 hours. It's so successful. Like I can't even believe how successful it is. Natasha is a Book Junkie is a blog that is, she's Australian. Natasha's Australian, but her blog has a massive US space. If you are looking for contemporary romance titles, and especially titles that readers who discovered romance through 50 Shades of Grey, or Twilight readers who are graduating into adult romance, those types of readers, they will probably, the books that she recommends will probably appeal to those readers. Smart Bitches Trashy Books, they've been around for ages, but out of all the blogs that started about the same time, they are the ones that have evolved through the decade, and their voice remains kind of fresh and contemporary. They have a stable of writers, and what I love about them is that if they think the book sucks, they will tell you, like, this book is an F, and these are the reasons why. You might still want to buy it because those reasons for them marking it down might be the exact reasons your readers want the book, but at least you'll know. And also, actually, the other thing about Smart Bitches is they still have a really robust comment thread. It's one of the few blogs that still manage to have comments on their platform. And they also run a podcast. Podcast is really great as well. And there's a site called WOC in Romance, Women of Colour in Romance. So they promote books by women of colour about women of colour. Diversity in romance has been an ongoing issue for quite some time, but it's slowly changing, and that conversation is happening now. The more generalist resources is, again, Love Oz YA. There is a blogger, Instagrammer, like avid book reader called Annie, and she runs Reader Review. Like, it's really hard to spell, but she is doing some really proactive things around reader communities. So she runs reading clubs she used to run it at Dimmicks. She's hosted book launches for Galaxy. And if you look at her Instagram, she does very quick interviews with authors. So I think I would watch out for what the stuff that she does. And I think she was part of that initiative where they left books on trains for people to discover. Like, it's really cool. Book Bloggers Australia is a directory. So if you're looking for a specific niche, oh my gosh, that went by really quickly. Specific niche, you can look for you can search for like science fiction or whatever in that directory. Books and Publishing, which is the trade magazine for books in Australia, has a monthly spotlight for bloggers. So that's also a great way to discover new bloggers, Australian bloggers. The Australian Women Writers Challenge is focused on reviews of works by women writers, but then they always link to the originating blogs. So it's also a good way to find blogs. And like I said, Book Riot is really good generalist site. BookBub, the newsletter, which I've talked about, NetGalley, Edelweiss, and then individual publishers and imprints, and especially the ones that have a relationship with your library, you probably want to sort of keep up to date. The other thing is if there are authors around your area, it would be good to have them, to get to know them. I think some authors don't realize that they can actually interact with their libraries, especially self-published authors. So podcasts, Australian podcasts to the left, non-Australian to the right. So these are my recommendations, obviously biased with female up the top. But like there's a couple of children's ones down the bottom. I would love to see more children's podcasts because my kids love them. Like they stop my podcast and play their podcasts when we're in the car. And I think this pack will be available. Yes. Yeah. And like I said, we need more podcasts because we can't get enough. So book discovery tips. You have to ask readers. That's really what it is. So if you're doing readers advisory, you need to know who your readers are. And some of them will have very different tastes. So it's also important to think of adjacent books. Like, okay, reader loves 50 Shades of Grey. Okay, do not recommend, what is that book, something O? Like, don't recommend that book. They're not going to like it. They're going to want small steps around that area of the genre until they can sort of branch out to larger steps. And generally, people who love books love to extend outwards out of the genre once they've satisfied the immediate urge to read more of the same. And we've all been through it, right? So questions to ask authors and publishers. So one of the things that I would advise is if you have author visits and publisher visits, like pick their brains. Which blogs are they promoting at? Because the authors and the publishers will know which blogs are the most effective for their campaigns. Like as a blog, of course, I want them to come to my blog and be on my podcast. But, some authors will do much, much better in Natasha is a Book Junkies blog because her audience is their audience. And it also gives you a sense of like which blogs are sort of maybe declining in popularity or increasing in popularity. Are you promoting on Facebook? What platforms are your readers using? So use them while you have them there at the library. So why social media? So social media gives you insights into readers. You're basically eavesdropping on conversation. So you can get a sense of the trends. So like for romance, when E.L. James was really popular, there was like a massive glut of billionaires, erotica, BDSM. That's tapered off now. So then we went through like sports heroes, athletes. Now we've got like women AFL teams in romance. And then now we're like cinnamon roll heroes. Like people are looking for really kind heroes. So when people start asking for books on Twitter going, can anyone recommend this or that? That's when you sort of see what's becoming popular. And it's really amazing because we actually start wanting very similar books in similar times because it's all cyclical. Readers have a vocabulary. So in romance, if I ask a librarian, do you have a book with an MC hero, no BDSM, a heroine who is not TSDL with an HEA? Like, that's the language of romance readers. So that means, do you have a book with a motorcycle club hero, no kinky sex, a heroine who is not too stupid to live with a happily ever after ending, right? So, like, if if you are servicing a group of readers, a large group of these readers, then it would be good to understand some of the terms that they use. And also, it's a way to find adjacent books to what your readers are reading, so that you can help them explore outside of their comfort zone without going too far beyond it. And also because it's really fun. At least for me, I find it fun. So, a couple of other things that I didn't put on the slides, but I thought you might find interesting. So in terms of discoverability, book blurbs are really important. So in romance, these are the terms that if I see it on a book blurb, I will never, ever buy or borrow the book. Tragic, heartbreak, bittersweet, generations, sweeping saga, anything that implies cheating, female ennui, like bored housewife, and anything to do with terminal illness. So there are a lot of readers with triggers that they just don't want in their happy books. So if you are somebody who's recommending romance, it's really important that you know that. And each of the genres will have their own sort of subset of things that readers want to avoid. And then I'd like to finish off by mentioning some insights from a reader survey conducted by a romance author called Murray Force in 2015. I read this out at the Australian Society of Authors Congress a couple of years ago, and there were some very heartbroken gasps in the audience. So, are you ready? 40% of her readers were introduced to an author via a free book, which is great news for libraries because all your books are free. And 85% were more likely to buy another book if they enjoyed that first free book. 52% said reviews had some impact, 25% said not really, not much. The most influential reviews were on, can you guess? Retail sites such as Amazon, 56%. Goodreads was only 16%, so there's like a massive drop. Blogs were like 10%, and I reckon that figure's gone down even since then. This is the one that broke the authors' hearts. 32% were not bothered by typos. And then, okay, so show of hands, how many of you have bought books because they were on like a New York Times or USA bestseller list? Okay, so 74% of readers said they'd never. And most had actually never even heard of these lists. So, of course, take this with a grain of salt because her readers are not going to be your readers because hers are very genre specific. But I think these numbers serve as a very good reminder that we have to approach readers' advisory with an open mind, a welcoming spirit, and a genuine curiosity about what excites our readers. We've run out of time, but if you have any questions for me, just come grab me on your way out to lunch and I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Kat. That was very, very informative. I'm wondering whether there are people who choose books with heroines who are too stupid to live. Yes. I only want to read books with stupid women in it. We have this is an RA 2018 bag as a little thank you for. And by the way, a limiter for me in movies is vomit. If there is throwing up in a movie, that's it. It is all over for me, but I can read about it. So it is lunchtime now. If we go out this door, I think, Ellen? Yes, we'll line up and have lunch in there. Don't forget to book talk with the person who is next to you in the line, and we need to be back in here ready to go at 12:45. That is 12:45.